Well, hello, everyone. It's good to see you all here. Some of our interns are on vacation, but we have a good group that I'm sure will engage in some lively discussion. This is Joyce Davis. I'm president and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Afarin Bellisario. She is an author of this book called Silence. I don't know if you can see it, but Silence Whispers. And Silence Whispers is really an incredible love tale, adventurous love tale that is set in Iran during a most historic period. I think it's right before World War One or whatever. But she will share that with us. But meanwhile, let me let everybody know who's at least here. Michelle Angert is here as our program director. Leah Almer, Rayan Bakshi, Connor Joyce, and Anish Koka. We hope some of our other interns will be joining us, but let's get started. Author Afarin Bellisario, welcome. We are happy to have you here. I did have a very good time reading Silenced Whispers. It was an incredible love tale. I just was riveted. And so tell us a little bit first about yourself and then about why you were so motivated to write this book.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I always consider myself a bridge between East and West and past and future. I was born and raised in Iran. I came to America to go to school. When I was in Iran, I loved to write. I still love to write. And so that was a passion that I was always with me. But when I came to United States, I picked up a very different subject. I studied engineering. I got a PhD from MIT, and it mostly has to do with the fight. Of course, I love technology, and I'm curious and stuff like that. But it's also, unfortunately, it's a faster route to make a living and be independent. Especially later on, I was proved very correct when the revolution in Iran happened, and I remained in the United States. I graduated from MIT in 1980, and some of you who might have studied, you are all very young, but some of you might remember the hostage crisis situation where Americans were taken hostage in Tehran for, I don't know, 444 days or whatever it was. And it was not a really good time to go back to Iran. But given the situation both in Iran and in America at that point, being a graduate with a degree in engineering was much more valuable than trying to write. I stayed with the high technology, spent most of my life in the world of semiconductors and digital signal processing and creating this little, smartphones, advocated for a lot of technologies. Then, as I grew older, there were two questions in my mind. One question was that, well, and again, I advocated for smartphones, and when social media came around, I worked for both Brannick and Newman, which was one of the first companies that came out with the idea of internet, and so everything was kind of at that point in time was everybody wanted this smartphones. But then as the smartphone became very prevalent, everybody had it, we started seeing the social media, the backlashes against social media, people getting addicted to social media, people were it was taking away from life and
Sure, sure.
enjoyment of
You're
life in many
absolutely right.
aspects.
Social media has been a truly plus and minus, but let's focus on you. So you came to the U.S. You've been working here in this capacity,
Yes.
but then you wanted to write. And how is it that you decided to write Silence Whispers?
Okay. So as I said, there was one question was that what does technology do to people? Second was that what
Mhm.
happened in Iran? I mean, we
Okay.
had this westernized country, and then I started studying history, and I started doing research, and I came about to see that the the modernization, the bringing of technology, and the effort to bring in technology and Western things to Iran also brought in ideas like like women's rights.
Uh-huh.
These things were never big in Iran of the 19th and 18th and earlier centuries, but all of a sudden these ideas became prevalent. People started thinking about it. And that kind of started a movement away from the traditionalist and into more of a modernist. But it was still small in the early 20th century, but this was the beginning. This was the time when a lot of things happened. A lot of things that happened later on in evolution, the going back to Islamist stuff, whatever. So these were all started in an earlier point. And I
Sure.
wanted to write about that. I wanted
Oh,
to
and I
communicate.
see. I'll share this with them. It says on the back, while other Iranian girls of the early 20th century cook, sew, and hope for marriage, Gohar climbs trees, reads books, plays tar, and dreams of escaping her forsaken desert town. But when her forbidden correspondence with a non Muslim boy is discovered, fear of banishment forces the fatherless Gohar to welcome the protection of Saleh Mirza, a powerful nobleman. And there's a story even in that as you get into this. And at 14, she marries his choice of husband, a 55-year-old politician, expecting to enter her marital home in a white chador and leave it in a white shroud. So there you have right off the bat the cultural difference there, the delving into the culture that a 14-year-old girl is going to be forced to marry a 55-year-old man, and she is just resigned that this has to be her fate. She will go in her wedding gown, but she won't leave that house until she's dead. But fate has it otherwise. And that's why I want to talk to you here, because the adventures that she has, including ending up not staying with that husband, uh,
Yes.
and going on a long adventure with another person, that is not a typical thing for an Iranian woman to do. And it could have cost her life.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, I just basically, I thought about it, and this, what will happen to a woman in that situation? And if that woman is like Gohar, is a little defiant, more than a little
Yes.
defiant, what would she do? She obviously will face a lot of uh, adversaries, including from herself, because it's not an easy decision. You don't just pick up and go. So there is a lot of tension internally and externally that she has to deal with. And I just wanted to show that both internally again and externally. So I thought that that would be best expressed in a novel, because novels, historical fictions, history is about events. This thing
Hmm.
happened, that thing happened. But a novel, a historical fiction, is about how people lived through those events. What
Yes.
happened to them? How do they feel? How do they react? And that's what I wanted to show.
And
And
she was living through a turbulent time. The beginning of war, there was a lot of going on around her, a lot of clandestine things. Russia was involved in Iran. There was a lot of danger, even going out on the street. She wasn't even really supposed to go out on the street unescorted by herself, but she did frequently. And as you were exploring her character, she's a bit of a rebel.
yeah.
How typical is she of the Iranian woman?
Well, the answer is kind of like I think that there is a kernel of defiance in all Iranian women, or the majority of them. Some, like myself, like Gohar, have a chance to show that kernel of defiance. and some don't. But even the ones who don't, you can see that the movement in Iran right now. And this again, one of the things that I wanted to say is that these movements are not new. They didn't start yesterday. They didn't start from getting some ideas from Americans or English or French or whatever. This was very much, an Iranian phenomena. In the 18th century, 19th century, there was a woman who went first without a cover, and she was stoned to death. But she
Mhm.
dared, and she was a poetess. She was very, very educated, very well educated, but she did wanted to go out without the cover, and this goes back 2.5 centuries ago. So it's the kernel of defiance is there, but how it's manifest itself, obviously there's this only small minority of people who have the whereabouts to get started on
Yeah.
that.
I will say that in going to Iran when I visited, working on one of the books I was working on, it was for a Western woman to have to now cover completely, right? But even
Yes,
it's more than just covering completely, which in some way gives you a completely anonymous identity. I mean, you you just go, no one knows who you are, or because you're all covered. But one of the issues is also your behavior has to change.
yes,
I
yes.
remembered as you guys know here that I'm kind of a free spirit. I'm very expressive. I'm loud sometimes, and all of that has to change. I have to really
Sure,
reject
sure,
what
absolutely.
I am. And I remembered I had a little girl that was with me at the time who was traveling with her mother, who was my guide. And I remember wanting to sing a song to her, Winnie the Pooh. And so I just wanted to break out in song, Winnie the Pooh. But that could have gotten me thrown into jail. And they said, no, 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 you can't sing in public. So that is the difference. And here you have this Gohar,
Sure, sure.
the who decides that not only is she going to throw off this, step out into the world on her own, but she's going to have a boyfriend and who is outside of her husband.
Yes,
And
yes.
so how that is something that was really, really because I kept having my heart in my throat because she could easily have been killed. And in some cases the family would have supported that.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
I think you're
At
frozen.
some point, she
Okay.
justifies that. She says that sort of she rebels against the traditions. And it's she's married to somebody who's much older than her. The man is who is not who's not even trying to kind of understand her word or her desires or her anything. So she just responds to her heart, an act of
Mm,
defiance. But by the way, just going back to the issue of chador, to covering, is that Iranian women in many cases have turned things around. For example, back in the time of the constitutional revolution, that goes back to 1906, 1905, women under the they would carry guns from I don't know, to the revolutionaries. They would carry all their
ah,
pamphlets. So,
under the Shador.
so this became a weapon. You don't see me. Okay, great, wonderful. I'm just going to carry whatever I want to carry. And of course, there were women that I mentioned that in the book that, hey, they use that to go and see their lovers. Hey, look,
Yep,
hey,
yep,
because
yep,
because when we deny people daylight, daylight is the best infectant.
yeah.
It's wonderful because you just need to, um, you know, uh, openness, open it. Let's talk about this issue. Let's talk about the same thing here. Let's talk about issues. Okay, you don't
Mhm.
agree with me. Why is it that you don't agree with me? What is it that you're trying to achieve? So openness is great, is wonderful,
Mhm.
and it works both ways. When you force people to hide, they also hide things that probably they shouldn't be doing.
There you go.
So
There you
that's
go.
the,
Well,
yeah.
let me read. Let me for the benefit of those who haven't read it, I'll give a little bit of another taste here, so you'll see about what we're dealing with here. It says, but fate takes her, Gohar, to Tehran, the big city, right? So she's from a little village in Iran. Now she goes to Tehran, where she's dazzled by the electric lights and gramophones, but appalled by the misery, poverty, corruption, and foreign meddling. The Farangi, right? Farangi. Endangering her life and marriage, she joins the reformists. These are people who want to reform Iranian society. We still have reformists in Iran trying to reform the very conservative religious rulers. But she says, while secretly, she was secretly idolizing Aslan, a mysterious Russian allied with the Iranian nationalists. Then Russia invades northern Iran and the country erupts. In the chaos of war, does a married Iranian Muslim have a future with a Russian Christian hunted by his own government? So she really gets involved in a lot
Yes.
of insurgent activities, a lot of violence, a lot of,
Yes.
and so it was just quite an interesting read for now. Is this book available in Iran as well?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's not translated to Farsi. Although
Okay.
I'm hoping somebody will do that. But people can buy it off Amazon, in Iran. But we haven't, of course, marketed in Iran, so I don't know. I am in the process of sending the book to Sharjah, which is Sharjah Book Festival, and
Hmm.
so it will be available in the Arab
Okay. So it's going to be available in the Arab world, but not necessarily, not
hopefully
sure in
somebody
Iran.
from Iran will take it there as well. So
Very good.
yeah, I mean, whether or not the people buy it from Amazon or not, I don't know.
So,
It's totally up to people, but
so is this your first book? Is this your first book?
it's my first novel.
Okay.
Yes,
All
yes.
right. Your first novel. Are you planning to write any others?
Absolutely. I'm working on the sequel. What happens next? We
Hmm.
won't tell people, but what happens next to Gohar and how she navigates the rest of the tumultuous time in Iran, and also so we'll talk about that in the second book. And I'm also I have written a bunch of essays about how technology today is changing our lives and how to live with it. And I have a newsletter that comes out. At some point, I will make that into a book of essays. So I have a few projects that I'm working on one at a time. But
Well, you're
as
definitely a
long as
writer. You're definitely
yes,
a writer. You
I
want to put things down. Yes.
yes, yes,
Well,
absolutely. I love to write. Yes,
well, before I
yes.
open it up to our interns for some questions here, let me ask you a little bit about your thoughts on what is going on now in Iran with women. We're seeing a lot of brave women. We've actually had, oh, I forget her name, who has all the hair. She was one of our
Yes,
speakers
yes,
once,
yes,
and
yes,
she is
yes.
leading, at least
Massy,
on this
Miss
side.
Massy. Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. And so my question is, what are your thoughts about women now, are they really going to succeed in throwing off the chador, or are they just going, is this just going to continue like this with so many young girls just getting beaten and killed?
And I think that at some point,
Well, I
government
think you're freezing on us, so you might have to repeat what you said just
will
now once you're back.
relent, and they would
Okay, you're back now. So why don't,
let me turn off the video. Maybe that's better.
okay. All right. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think that the movement will continue, no question about it. Uh, Women will fight, and I think at some point the government will make some openings. Maybe we won't go back to the Shah's regime when people were wearing bikinis and had a very open society, much opener society, but somewhere in between. So I think that women will prevail as they have before. So I'm very hopeful. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be somebody giving them the right. It's a lot of struggle, but I think they're gonna, eventually they will prevail. I'm hopeful in that.
Yeah, as I was looking back to make sure I had her name right, we had Marcia Alinejad. The Wind in
Yes,
My Hair is her book. Let me see, I'll share that screen with you if I can.
sure, of
Um,
course.
the Wind in My Hair is, we had her as a speaker, oh, several years back before COVID. um, and she was, basically talking about the fight for Iranian women to really just have the basic freedom of being able to uncover their hair. But as we know, it's actually more than just uncovering your hair. It is
Yes,
whether women and girls have, at least in Iran, girls have
yes,
the right to be educated. There are
yes,
many incredibly educated women, and there have even been vice presidents of Iran who were women before they were vice presidents in the United States, believe it or not.
that's
But
true.
there's still an effort by the religious authorities to absolutely control the public life and the public persona. Now, let me just say this to you. The truth is, as I look at it, sometimes Western society goes too far, and there's just too much. There's just no holds barred on how people appear in public and how they dress and all of that, which to me I don't like, right? But on the
Yes,
other hand, to absolutely stifle a woman's expression in public is also going too far. So,
yes,
Averine, I mean, you're optimistic that you think the problem that I have is that we're still seeing young girls who take off their scarves and walk in public, basically being beaten, being arrested and still being killed. Many of them, right?
yes, there are. And again, I mean, this is my kudos to their courage. But as Gohar would say, fear is no excuse for cowardice. And
Mm,
when we are as people, and freedom is never free. We've seen it in the United States. We have seen it in many, many cases. Um, People have to fight for their agency, for their freedom, and part of that freedom is freedom expression. You're absolutely correct that maybe there is a happy ground where we respect the tradition of others. You don't go out with, I don't know, with mini shorts to Vatican. It's an expression of respect. Uh,
yes,
you
yes.
have to respect other people's traditions and beliefs, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a happy medium. There's a way where you can express yourself without being disrespectful, without being overly whatever. What you do in your private life should stay private. It's yours.
Mhm,
Nobody should
mhm.
question that, whether or not you love somebody else, whether or not that person is a man or a woman or whatever. It has to remain free, but it's also can be, more circumspect, more more respectful to others. You don't have to, make a big deal out of it. So it's just the same thing about everything else. That we need a happy medium to be able to live together, because we
There
are
you go.
all community.
Well, here you have it. It's Silenced Whispers, and it is by Afarin or Dubadi Bellisario. Bellisario must be your husband's name, right?
Yes, it is. It's
Uh, an Italian, I would take it. Okay.
yes, yes.
So let me open it up to our interns to see what questions they may have, either on Iran, on your life. When did you say you came to the United States?
1974.
74 for work reasons, correct? Or study to
For
study.
school. I went to school. I went to New York University.
Okay, all right. And then you ended up making your life here in the United States.
That's correct. Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. So, questions from our interns. Anything you want to ask author Afarin Bellisario? Yes, go ahead, Rayan.
Okay, so I was wondering, like, what you described, like, before the conservatives in Iran took power, there was like a different life for women. So, other than just appearing different, what were the other aspects of that life? Like, how is it different from now?
Well, first of all, one of the things about the Iran before revolution was that, as it is today, there were two sets of people there, and there was a set of people who lived. And I always say it's like North Tehran, South Tehran. Part of people like my family, like part of my family, we lived like Western style. I wore mini skirt to high school, and people, women were very free to whatever they want to free. They were free. They still are free to go to universities, because that's also another thing that Islamic republics tried to stop, but they couldn't, because women went out and demonstrated and said a lot of things. So there was freedom for women to work. It wasn't absolute freedom. The family law that allowed women to seek divorce and seek the custody of their children partially was approved in the late 60s, but finally fully approved in 1975. So there's a lot of freedoms that were granted through that law to women. And then, as I said, in appearance, you could, in the 70s, women started being able to travel. Many women drove. What revolution did is that basically in the beginning of revolution, they banned everything. And then women, started fighting back and won some of them. And there were even there was one point a ban from the religious government that the women cannot study, I don't know, a whole bunch of different professions, including engineering and science and this and that and the other. But they also repealed that later on, because again there was a lot of pushbacks. But still, this has been 40 some odd years of working and going back and forth and trying and fighting. There was a time when women were banned from going to universities. Now they are back to being able to go to university. In fact, Iran has more women graduates from universities than men. So, you know, uh, basically the efforts of the traditionalists to turn the clock fully back was stopped, or little by little. But still, the expression of clothing and expression of love is forbidden in Iran. You're not allowed to go and sing whatever you want to sing. And part of the reason I make my book a love story, besides the fact that I enjoy writing love stories, is the fact that this is one of the most fundamental, basic right of human being to love another person. And again, another person could be anything, could be another, person of the same sex or opposite sex or whatever. But this is a fundamental desire. It's something that people should be able to enjoy freely without having to be afraid of being punished and sent to jail. And then that's another thing that is not only being woman is is it's a crime in Iran, but also being part of LGBT
Right,
community is a crime.
right.
So it's sort of like, hey, the country is banning love, hey.
Well, let me give Rayan a little bit more context. Rayan, what
Yes,
she's referring to, Ayatollah Khomeini,
yes,
right, led a revolution that brought in this very conservative and strict Islamic regime. Now, you should also be aware that Iran is a Shia state, as opposed to a Sunni state. So you've got two main branches of Islam. You've got the Shias, which is Iran, and you've got the Sunnis. The Sunnis are by far the more dominant group. They're more Sunnis, and the Shia are basically many of them, most of them located in Iran, some in Iraq. That's mainly where they're most are located. The other thing you should be aware of is that there are religious doctrinal differences between these two groups. They broke after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, when there was a discussion in the Islamic world of who should be the ascendant, who should take over the mantle of Islam, who should be the next leader of the religion. Well, there was a disagreement over whether it should be a family line, whether the nephew of the prophet should inherit that mantle, and or whether it should be based on who's the most capable, who was going to, how are we going to vote on this, right? So those were the two differences. The Shias felt it should be a lineage, a blood lineage. And so even
yes,
now, when you go to Iran, you will see many of the clerics with black turbans. That is a sign
yes,
that they say that their family is descended from the prophet. But that's the main differences. And there are differences in the way they pray and that kind of thing. But both of these groups do believe that Muhammad was the final prophet sent by God. Is that correct? I mean, you correct me, Afarin.
yes, you did a great job. Fantastic. Yes, I couldn't have explained it better.
So,
Yes, fantastic. Yes,
and the one thing that many of them share, although not everywhere, is so many misinterpret, many would say, the teachings about women and put and really restrict their freedoms. That is
yes,
not uniform throughout the Muslim world, because if you, I
yes,
one of the things that I did, I shared with you in my earlier writings, was to go around the world and really see how women are living in Islamic societies. And you can have the most free from Indonesia or from Malaysia to the most restricted, I would say, in places like Saudi Arabia and Iran.
yes,
So that's what we're dealing with here. And what is just so phenomenal is that we are seeing women rise up and really being willing to die,
yes,
including young women being willing to die for this basic freedom that we enjoy here without any thought to it.
yes. And
Thanks
I
for
think
that
that, like
question,
you said,
Rayan. You allowed us to cover a lot of
yes.
ground.
Yeah, I think that what you said is very true. Chador, the covering is a symbol. If Iranian women enjoyed all the freedoms in the world, they could select whatever they want, go wherever they want, they would have worn a little scarf. Okay, it's no problem. But we see that, for example, you can't go to a government agency with just a scarf. They would scrutinize you. My cousin was walking in the streets of Tehran with sandals, and the morality police said you can't have your toes showing. You have to put socks on under with the sandals. So these are the intrusion. Intrusion is what is Iranian women are fighting for. And That's the most important basic thing.
And the who one some might call the founder of this new revolution, female revolution, is a woman called Masa Amini, right?
Yes,
And she she was 22 years old.
yes,
She died on September 16th, 2022, in a hospital after
yes,
her arrest by the country's morality police over allegedly not wearing her hijab to their liking. It's not that she didn't have a hijab on, but I think she may have had a pretty little curl hanging out or something like that, and they stopped her and took her into custody for that and ended up killing her. Took her, she
yes,
was actually traveling with her brother, as I understand it. And so she was doing the right thing, traveling on with a male, right in her job with a little curl hanging out. So she gets arrested and killed. Well, that
yes,
sets off this, what we're seeing now, years of protests, unfortunately, years of other girls being killed.
yes.
But they are refusing, many are refusing to back down. If you are on Twitter, you will see constant pictures of girls and women out defying the authorities, just protesting, but also just individually doing what they want to do. I don't have the scarf on, kill me.
Well, I mean, I think I want to also point out, first of all, that between the beginning of the revolution until now, there have been many, many women who have, including Shirin Ebadi, who won the Nobel
Yes,
Peace Prize, who had been jailed, who had been beaten, who had been, everybody, every time that women want to have something, again, they have to fight for every little thing. So Mahsa she didn't go out to become a symbol, but she became a symbol, unfortunately. But that's just sort of like it's not one thing. It's a continuation of everything that's happening that makes the women so receptive to message of, hey, this is, we got to do this thing. And right now, for example, a lady who is who is the leader of labor movement, she's in jail and she's going to be she's condemned to death, and she could be, I don't remember her name, unfortunately, my senior moment, but she's quite a character, quite a person, who basically she wants the rights for workers. She doesn't even want to have her own scarf taken. She wants the workers to have right to work, and like a proper wages, because as you know, inflation is huge in Iran. Yes, that's the one that it's so it's many things that Iranian women are against, and but basically they want a basic freedom. um it's it's and then for themselves and for the men in their lives and for their sons and for their daughters, and so it's just a long um, struggle against forces of um, you know
yeah. Well, her
oppression. Really, it's not even tradition anymore. It's oppression.
oppression of a sex of people, exactly. Her name is Sharifeh Mohammedi.
Yes,
And
yes, that's the lady. That's the lady. Yes, and
that's right.
there's a petition that people can sign. Um, uh, it's the show of support for her. I don't know whether or not she would be exonerated. I don't think so. But who knows? We now have in Iran there is a more open president. Pezeshkian, Iraj Pezeshkian, just elected president in Iran. So perhaps his moderation would help, you know, to free this lady who really hasn't done anything. I mean,
Right, right.
she,
Well,
oh,
it
she,
says Iranian
yes,
authorities not only relentlessly target women activists, but they
yes,
carry out additional attacks and repression on women from ethnic and religious minorities. So all women are really being really under the gun. And 16 women here, political prisons in Evan prison, wrote
Yes,
that, they stand alongside Sharife Mohammadi and all those threatened by the death penalty, because it is
yes,
really a grueling time now for women in Iran, for sure. So I
yes,
that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you about this book that really
yes,
makes a heroine of a woman during a very difficult time. A heroine, as you pointed out, because she has to deal with her own internal limitations that living in a society like that places on you, but then the external limitations that are
yes.
there.
Yes,
Yeah.
because she does her own judgment. Maybe I should live, happily in my little environment. But when the time comes for her to make a stand, she does, and that's the important thing. That's what it means. That fear is no excuse for cowardice. When the time comes for each of us to stand our ground, we should, uh,
Mm,
because
mm.
we believe in it. We believe in human being having dignity, human being having the ability to make their living and to make their life better.
Well, it's just clear, as Connor Joyce has written he wrote a wonderful op-ed about the need for these strictures and for women to be freed around the world, to have the equal
Sure.
rights. But it is just incredible when you do go in many countries around the world, how the mentality of men is that they own women, that that they're this is just
Yes.
their property,
Yes.
and you stay out of it. And it is also something, I will say this, that we hinted a little bit at when we were talking to Dure, because
Mhm.
those ideas, even when new immigrants come into our country, persist. They don't just
Yes.
leave them at the door because some Americans have a different idea. They stay with them. And to be honest, we're seeing it play out in some of the criticisms against the expected Democratic nominee. The fact that she's a woman is unsettling people,
Yeah,
right?
hey, oh, the crime of being a woman. That's
And
you
yet we have known
know,
And yet we have known in history some pretty powerful women. Margaret
yes,
Thatcher was
yes,
nobody to play with, right?
yes, yes,
Nor was, I mean, we could go through a whole litany of women leaders who were pretty
sure.
capable people. Escaping me, the woman in Germany who spent, it's just recently,
Merkel,
Angela Merkel.
and
Yes,
Angela
Angela Merkel.
Merkel. Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes,
And
yes,
so anyway,
yes,
there are
yes, of
Benazir
course.
Bhutto, when unfortunately she was assassinated. But we have lots
Yes,
of them.
yes.
Okay, any other questions that from our Leah? I know you must have a question. This is a topic for young ladies for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I was wondering. It's interesting because I actually learned about briefly we covered like the Iranian Revolution and the Islamic Revolution in my history class last year.
Mhm.
But so like the story that was set before the revolution occurred, right?
Yeah,
What story? My story,
sure.
yes, yes, long before that. It happened after the constitutional revolution of 1906. So this is early 20th century, 1908, 1910. And I think the book ends in 1916. So it is long before the Islamic Revolution. It's
Yeah.
But
before Pahlavi regime.
there are still very strong religious and cultural limitations on women. Very strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. 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 And
Yeah.
in
So
some sense, yeah, the government wants to turn the clock back to that time.
mm. Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's interesting because when we were learning about it, the way it was kind of described was that like before the revolution occurred, like Tehran was kind of like a cultural mecca or whatever. Like we learned that it had like pretty vibrant culture and like there was like especially the fashion scene there or something, I want to say it
Yeah.
was. But then
During a
after,
certain period. During a certain
yeah,
yes,
period.
yeah,
So as
yes,
you know, time passes on, and what is clear for one decade becomes different another decade. And that's
yes,
why many people are worried is the US getting ready to go into a different decade? You know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's another reason, hidden reason that I wanted to write this book, because there are unfortunate trends that we see, which is concerning. So, yes, you're absolutely correct that Iran went from a much more closed society into a little opener, westernized society. Although I always say that even when I was growing up in 60s and 70s, North Tehran, yes, ladies were wearing mini skirts. Everything was fashionable. There were discotheques. There were a lot of freedom up there. But the South Tehran was still a lot of traditionalist. There was a bastion of traditionalists. And again, nothing wrong with that, but just sort of, even back then, a lot of families would not want their girls to go to universities, because that would meant that the girls will sit beside a guy, and that would meant the girls would have to not wear the hijab. It wasn't forbidden, but it wasn't looked at favorably. So I know for a fact that there were ladies that, for example, were working uptown in North Tehran in offices, and they lived with their families in the more traditional parts of Tehran. So they would leave the house wearing a scarf and a long skirt and a very thick, stockings. And somewhere along the line, they would put nylons on and a shorter skirt, and the scarf would come out, and then they would put some makeup on, and then they would be presentable as they felt to the northern Tehran office environment. So it was not all monolithic. There were a lot of big differences between different parts of even Tehran.
And that
So
was during the period you're thinking of the Shah of Iran.
correct.
That was
Yes, yes.
during his
The
time
under Pahlavi regime, yes.
under
And
Pahlavi. And
just going back, Pahlavi, Reza Shah, the father of the last Shah, came to power in 1921, and in 1925 he became monarch. He became Shah. He became the king. And he wanted to sort of modernize the country. And one of the things that he did to begin with was he banned chador. So there were policemen in the streets who would take people's chador off. And of course, it helped some younger women, but for older women, that was sort of like frightening, by itself. And it's sort of, I mean, at least it's just making women and women's clothing such a big issue either way, is to me a sign of trying to keep them like as chattel, as you said, and take the decision away as though they can't make a decision for
a
themselves.
similar
So
thing happens in
that's
Turkey. When Turkey at one
yes,
point banned women from wearing the scarf, right? You couldn't do it. In fact, I
yes,
remembered doing a
yes,
profile covering a woman who had been elected to the parliament, and they wouldn't let her take her seat because she refused to take off her headscarf.
yes.
So, it's been all over the map and trying to control you, Leah.
Exactly. It's bizarre. I mean, okay, I can understand, allowing them to have children or not to have children. This has to be people's
Choice.
decision.
Their own personal
So,
choice. Exactly. Exactly.
your
Well,
choice. Yes.
gentlemen, I know you probably have a few questions, but this is more for you than for even the ladies, so that you get in your heads that you can't control other. Okay, that you have to let people be people. Okay. How about Hamza
Yes.
Mohammed? Do you have any questions? No.
I personally don't have a question, but I feel like it's sad what's happening to the women in Iran in terms of their situation. Because honestly, not going to school and also killing people. So for that. I feel I just feel awkward. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, the wonderful
How
thing about Iran is that they are at least able to go to school. It's not like
Yes,
Afghanistan. In
yes,
Iran, they're professionals. They are, and that's part of the problem too. I mean, these are very smart women. They're capable. They're doctors. They are all kinds of things, and they're
yes,
still
exactly,
restricted. It's not like they're dummies in any stretch of the imagination. But
exactly.
there is still the attempt to want to control their movement, their behavior, their freedom, but what they can and can't do. It is worse in Afghanistan, I will say that, where you can't be educated. So
That's true.
that's
That's
pretty
true.
bad.
That's
Say any
that's
questions on your part?
Nope, not really.
Okay. Connor, I know you always have a question or
A
a
lot of my
comment.
questions I already had answered, but
Okay.
I guess my major one is so going back to the protests that you talked about. Around 22,000 women were sent or so arrested, and
yes,
then 500 of those were killed in Iran
yes,
in the last couple of years.
yes.
What pressure has the international community done to, or can do, I guess is a better way of saying that, can do to kind of force the hand and give a choice to the people that are in Iran rather than having it dictated to?
Well, I mean, in my opinion, the fact that we are not there, and the sanctions, basically we're not there. We can't affect anything. And I think, there are two schools of thought, and I'm known to argue against myself, but we are not there. Americans are not there. Europeans who are there are small, so it's. Um, we can't affect things except for people like Mezali Nejad, who is here and who is advocating for women, and the rest of us can also advocate for women. I think that Europeans and Americans at this point can do two things. One is that to support Iranian artists, Iranian writers, Iranian Iranian people, and also to let them know that they're not alone. And that's unfortunately there's not much else. Given the fact that the government is already has zillions of sanctions, I don't know whether or not more sanctions will make any sense or make any difference. But supporting to the extent that's possible, it's a good thing.
I put in the chat there Masam Alanijad's Twitter feed because she's probably the leading in the West advocate for these women. Every day she's posting, she's keeping
Sure,
the information out there. If you want to follow her to stay
sure.
informed, then it would be a good idea because she's posting pictures from around. They're sending her stuff, and yeah, go ahead, Mohammed.
Yeah, I just wonder because she mentioned actually the school of thoughts. I don't, I want to know like, is this movement inspired by the Shias like kind of way of thinking about the religion, or it's just cultural?
No, no, I don't. I mean, I'm not a scholar, of course. I don't know. I mean, I know just rudimentary stuff, but I don't think it's a specifically Shia or Sunni. It comes from culture of Iranian women who have always been resistant to oppression, resistant to, as I said, the small acts of defiance. And it's all over. And Iranian women, strong women, and they want to learn, they want to become professionals. And I think this is a cultural phenomena rather than a religious phenomena.
And
So,
if you look not far away at Saudi Arabia, you see a similar thing.
yeah,
And many of the Saudi women also have fought recently just to be able to drive,
yes,
right? They had to go through a lot. Now they're at least able to drive.
Yes.
But it took fighting. It took a lot. People were thrown in jail just, and you still have to wear the hijab in Saudi Arabia. You have to cover your what is it? They call it abaya. That has
Abaya,
to be
yes.
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 I've been there, and it had to cover in black with the abaya, and
Yes.
so and that's a Sunni country. They're
Yeah.
Sunnis,
Yes.
and so you have the Shias here. But frequently, what you will find is that people will utilize religion as the hammer,
Yes.
that they will use it to say that uh you know the Quran mandates that women be completely covered. And I remembered asking some of the most learned scholars to show me in the Quran where it says that, and I was not able to get them to do. There is nothing that mandates a woman be completely covered in the Quran. Nothing. It does call for modesty, that a woman should cover
Exactly.
her her front, so to speak, but does not call for complete covering in any form or fashion.
Yeah, and you pointed it out that the modesty, it depends on the culture. The modesty in Indonesia is not the same as
Yeah,
modesty in Iran or Turkey or in America. So
correct.
yeah, and the Quran also calls for modesty by men. So it's
Yes,
not,
true.
it's every Muslim should be modest. You know, to wear something that doesn't attract undue attention.
Exactly.
So
Mohammed, you have another question. Go ahead.
yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say it didn't come in the Quran, of course, nowhere that a woman should cover. But it did came in the Sunnah, which is like the hadith from the
Mhm.
Prophet.
Yeah, we know the
Yeah.
hadiths, but it doesn't make it show that is the tradition and the history of what happened before, right? That's to oh, Naomi's trying to get in. So send us the hadith that mandates covering, because I have not been able to find it. I've spoken with some of the most, probably the top thinkers. It does require, for the Quran does stipulate in the verse, and I can find it, that a woman should be modest and cover certain, but it does not require hair and face and all of that. Some places there's what they call strict purda, where everything is covered, including your eyes and your hands. I have been in places where nothing is shown. A woman is not able to even like there's gauze that covers the face completely,
Yes. Yes.
and that's called strict purda. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I know some who are doing it by choice, not
Yes, exactly.
by kind of they're not being forced to it. It's just that they do it by force. No,
I
not
think
by
I
force,
think
but
that's
by
what
choice.
Afreen I think that's what Afreen and I are saying, that if you want to do that, if that is a woman's choice to completely cover,
Sure.
or cover partially, or cover whatever, fine. No one should. In fact, I'm very much don't like some of the laws that were passed in Europe, in France, I believe in particular, that forbids women from covering. Now they were claiming that it is difficult for driving or something, or creates a dangerous situation for identifying people. At any rate, the point is that you should be free, if this is how you would like to dress that way, but not to be forced to dress, or forced to not dress, to forced to take off the shador if you want to have it. That should not be the case. I mean, disagree with me if you want. It's just, to me, a basic human freedom to be able
Yes.
to present yourself as you would like to be presented in public, as long as you're not offending someone else.
Yes.
I don't like obscenity and vulgarity in public.
Yes. Yes. And again, what you say, I mean, just my great grandmother, after the Pahlavi, after the Reza Shah banned chador, she never left the house.
Yeah.
Basically, she just didn't want to go out and subject herself. And then it was her belief that she wanted to cover herself. It should have been allowed. And I can understand, okay, if it's allowed, then some men might force their wives or daughters or whatever to wear chador, but that has to come from gradually educating men, and there are a lot of men that I know who believe that women should be free. That requiring women to cover is just telling men that they're child. They can't control their impulses, and that's insulting to many men that I know. So it's so it's just that, like, you got to be free to do whatever you want to do within reason. Exactly.
Right. Naima, it's good to see you here. Are you back, or are you still in France?
Yes, I'm back.
Oh,
I
good.
got
Good
back
to
2
have you
days
back.
ago.
We were discussing with author Afarin Bellisario her book called Silence Whispers, which basically allowed us to talk about the state of women in Iran. And so we've been talking about that, and whether religion is dictating this or culture is dictating this, and really it's an issue in many cultures around the world, the status of women. We also pointed out that Connor wrote a nice op-ed about it, calling for it to end, this subjugation of women around the world. So, any questions for our author, Afarin, before we let her sign off or give her last words for us? Afarin, do you want to offer any last thoughts for us to end our discussion on silenced whispers?
No, I just I'm honored, and I am very happy to be here with the young people, especially, and yourself, who know about the culture and about the Iranians, and um, I'd love to have this conversation. And thank you so much. Thank you for all of you being here. And please read Silenced Whispers. Tell your friends about it if you liked it.
And I will say this as we sign off. Among the countries that I've visited, and there are a lot around the world that I've visited, the culture, the people of Iran are among the most impressive I've ever been exposed to. The history, the fact that this small nation, this dynamic group of people, has had such an incredible influence even on Western civilization. You should read that. At one point, they were demanding taxation from European countries. They were in such control of the world in ancient history. And this is why I've told people today, these proud people are not about to be dominated by the West. They will go down in flames with the rest of us before that is allowed to happen. That's what we're seeing here in the defiant Iran, even under a religiously oppressive regime. That whatever that spirit is in these Iranian people, it is something to reckon with. It really is. These are an incredibly gifted group of people. Their history is phenomenal. So with that, I urge
Yes,
you.
thank you. Thank you so much. We are
That's
all
all right. Go back
audacious.
and read a little bit about ancient Iranian history so you will even know a little bit better about your own. Okay. See you guys later. Wait, bye-bye, Afarin. We have to
Thank
stay
you so
on.
much, Joyce. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, dear. Bye-bye. We'll be in contact.
So
Okay.